What if the biblical figures never existed? There is a silence more deafening than any scream. It is the silence of something that never happened, a divine call that never echoed through the desert of Ur, a sea that remained eternally closed, a stone that never flew towards the forehead of a giant. Close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine, what if the figures that support the pillars of our civilization simply had never existed? I'm not talking about erasing names from history books. I'm talking about removing the invisible foundations that build everything you know, every law you obey, every concept of right and wrong that pulses in your blood, every painting hanging in the world's most important museums. All of that built upon stories. But what if those stories were just that? Elaborate narratives, sophisticated myths, fictions that became truths because we repeated them long enough. Today, you will enter a parallel world, a world where Abraham never heard supernatural voices ordering him to sacrifice his son, where Moses never climbed a mountain to receive tablets of stone, where David was just another anonymous shepherd who died without glory, without ever facing any giant. This is not an attack on faith. It is something far more dangerous. It is an invitation to think the unthinkable. The most profound change in human history may not be an event, but an absence. Imagine waking up in a reality where 3 billion people on the planet follow religions that simply don't exist, where the 10 Commandments were never written, where the concept of a chosen people never infected the collective consciousness of humanity, where Renaissance art would have completely different themes, where the Crusades never stained the earth with blood in the name of stories that never happened. Are you ready to see civilization through a lens you've never considered? Because once you look through it, you'll never see the world the same way again. Let's start with the oldest figure, the patriarch, the father of nations. Or rather, let's start with the void he would leave if he had never existed. Abraham, the man who supposedly heard God ask him to do the unthinkable, sacrifice his own son, the story that became the ultimate metaphor for blind faith. But what if that moment never happened? What if Abraham was just a character created by ancient scribes trying to make sense of the world's chaos? Think about the consequences. Without Abraham, there is no idea of a special covenant between a God and a specific people. Without that covenant, Judaism as we know it wouldn't be born. And without Judaism, well, that's where things get really interesting. Christianity and Islam are built upon the foundations of Judaism. Jesus is presented as a direct descendant of Abraham. Muhammad traces his spiritual lineage back to the same patriarch. Remove Abraham from the equation, and you're not just erasing one man. You're detonating the 3 largest monotheistic religions on the planet. 3 billion people vanished from the spiritual map of humanity. But where would they go? Here is where it gets fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Humanity doesn't stop searching for meaning just because some stories don't exist. We are creatures who need narratives like we need oxygen. So, in this alternate world, other stories would fill the void. Perhaps the Greek mystery cults would become dominant. Perhaps Persian Zoroastrianism would conquer the West. Or perhaps something completely new would emerge, something we can't even imagine because our imagination has been shaped by the stories that actually exist. But there's something more subtle happening here, something most people don't realize. The stories of Abraham didn't just create religions, they created concepts. The concept of sacrifice for faith, the concept that obeying the divine is above human morality, the concept that there is a chosen, special, separate people. These concepts leaked out of religion and infected politics, philosophy, the collective psychology of humanity. Remove Abraham, and these mental viruses never spread. Think of the Holocaust, think of the Crusades, think of the endless conflicts in the Middle East. Now consider how many of these horrors depend at some level on the idea that certain peoples have special alliances with the divine. Am I saying that without Abraham there would be no violence? Of course not. We're human. We would find other excuses to kill each other, but they would be different excuses, and that changes everything. Now we go to the desert, to a man with a staff in his hand and supposedly the power of a god at his side, Moses, the liberator, the lawgiver, the man who looked at the sea and commanded it to part. Except in this world, he never did, because he never existed. Take a deep breath, because the implications of this are devastating in a way you haven't fully processed yet. Without Moses, there are no 10 Commandments. And yes, I know what you're thinking, but these laws are obvious, right? Don't kill, don't steal. Wrong. So profoundly wrong it hurts. These laws are not obvious. They're products of specific cultural contexts, and the way they were codified completely changed the course of human ethics. Think of it this way. Before the 10 Commandments, laws were pragmatic. The Code of Hammurabi, for example, was brutal but logical. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Direct consequences for direct actions. But Moses, or rather the story of Moses, introduced something radically different. Laws given by an absolute divine authority. They are not suggestions. They are not social contracts. They are commands from God. And this completely changes the nature of morality. Without this narrative, Western ethics would have evolved completely differently. Perhaps we would have followed the Greeks more closely, where morality was debated, questioned, and philosophized, where there wasn't a stone tablet saying, "It's like this because I said so." Imagine a world where the basis of law is not divine authority, but human consensus, discussion, constant evolution. Does it seem utopian? Perhaps. Or perhaps it would be chaotic in ways we cannot foresee. But there's something even deeper happening here. The story of Moses created a narrative template that humanity can't stop repeating. The liberator, the chosen one, the one who leads his people out of slavery toward the promised land. Recognize this pattern? You should. It's everywhere. In movies, in political revolutions, in social movements. Martin Luther King Jr. used this narrative explicitly. He literally saw himself as a modern-day Moses. I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. Remove Moses from the story, and you remove that archetype from the collective unconscious. Revolutionary leaders would have to find other metaphors, other models, other ways to inspire the masses. American history would be different. The civil rights movement would have a different language. And language isn't just words. Language shapes thought. Thought shapes action. Are you beginning to see how it all connects? Let's talk about something no one mentions, the Exodus itself. 40 years wandering in the desert, an entire generation dying so that a new generation, free from the slave mentality, could enter the promised land. This story created the idea that prolonged suffering is necessary for purification, that generations need to be sacrificed so that the future will be better. Think of how many 20th century political ideologies used exactly this logic. The current generation needs to suffer to build paradise for the next one. Sound familiar? It should. It's pure Moses. And there's more. The idea of a wandering, homeless people searching for a promised land. This concept became the central identity of a people for 3,000 years. It shaped diasporas, returns, geopolitical conflicts that still bleed into today's news. Remove Moses, remove the Exodus, and the history of the Middle East is unrecognizable. Jerusalem might have just been another ancient city, not a focal point of endless religious wars. But here's the real coup de grace. Without Moses, the very concept of a sacred book might not exist. The Torah, supposedly written by Moses, established the model, divine text, God's word in written form, infallible, eternal. Without this model, perhaps religions would have remained more fluid, more oral, more open to interpretation and change. Books are fixed. Books create orthodoxy. Orthodoxy creates fundamentalism. Can you imagine a world where religious fundamentalism based on sacred texts simply doesn't exist because no one ever established that texts could be sacred? The waters of the Red Sea never parted because there was never anyone there to command them. And in the absence of that miracle, humanity would have followed paths we can't even begin to map. But wait, we're not finished yet. There's still a boy with a sling and 5 stones who needs to disappear too.
David,
The shepherd boy with a sling in his hand, a stone flying in slow motion, a giant falling like a demolished tower. You know this story so well that it doesn't even seem like a story anymore. It's a cultural reflection. David versus Goliath. We say this when startups face monopolies, when underdogs challenge champions, when any unlikely contender faces any impossible challenge. But what if that stone had never flown? Take David out of the story, and you're not just removing a king from Israel, you're tearing out the very idea that the improbable can win. David isn't just a military victory, he's the fundamental underdog narrative, the seductive promise that size doesn't matter, that faith overcomes strength, that God chooses the weak to shame the powerful. This idea is so ingrained in the Western psyche that you don't even realize you're thinking with it. How many times have you rooted for the underdog? How many times have you believed that effort can overcome resources? This is the drug David injected into civilization, improbable hope. And like all drugs, it has side effects. How many people have wasted their lives waiting for their David moment, hoping that God would choose them despite their improbability, refusing training because David didn't need it, refusing strategy because David trusted in God? David gave us hope, but he also sold a beautiful lie that being improbable is being destined. Now, let's delve deeper. David becomes king, the model king, the king after God's own heart. This created something devastating, the fusion of divine authority and political power. David doesn't rule because he is strong, he rules because God anointed him. For centuries, European kings used this logic. I rule because God chose me. To question my authority is to question God, the divine right of kings. Absolute monarchy, it all originates in the narratives of David. Without him, politics and religion might have remained separate. And David is a poet, a warrior and a poet. He kills enemies and writes psalms. This duality created a hypnotic archetype, the brutal and sensitive leader who sheds blood and tears. Do you recognize this pattern? It's in leaders who justify violence with devotion, in figures who massacre in the name of noble ideals. The Psalms attributed to David shaped the language of Western spirituality, how we express grief, how we cry out to the divine. Why have you forsaken me? These words have echoed for 2,000 years. Without these texts, not only would religion be different, poetry would be different, music would be different. The way people speak to God in agony would be unrecognizable. Think of works of art. Michelangelo sculpting that perfect body in marble. Caravaggio painting David with the head of Goliath. Centuries of artists obsessed with that shepherd boy. Remove David, and museums have empty walls. And art isn't decoration. Art is how civilizations define themselves, how their heroes dream. But here's the final blow. David is imperfect. He sees Bathsheba and desires her. He commits adultery. He has her husband killed. He is confronted and crumbles in repentance. This story created something rare, the idea that God's chosen ones can fail terribly and still be loved. Redemption after betrayal. Without this narrative, would we be more merciless towards leaders' failings or more cynical, unable to believe in redemption? Impossible to know. The giant never fell. The stone never flew. The boy never existed. And without him, humanity would have other heroes, other kings, other obsessions. But what haunts me is not what we would have, it's what we cannot imagine.
Now, take a deep breath, because we need to talk about what really happens when you remove these three figures simultaneously. It's not just adding three absences. It's watching a domino effect that completely redraws the map of human consciousness. Abraham, Moses, and David don't exist, and with them, 3 billion people disappear from the spiritual map. Christians, Jews, Muslims, all following religions that simply wouldn't have been born. But nature hates a vacuum, and the human soul hates it even more. So what fills this gigantic void? Where would 3 billion spiritual seekers turn? The answer is simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. perhaps the Eleusinian mysteries in Greece would become dominant. Initiation cults where spiritual knowledge was experienced, not read from sacred books. Imagine a Western civilization where spirituality is about personal mystical experience, not about obeying ancient texts. No fixed dogma, no rigid orthodoxy, but also no shared moral anchor. Or perhaps Persian Zoroastrianism had conquered the world, a dualistic religion where good and evil are cosmic forces in eternal war. No original sin, no concept of redemption, just a constant choice between light and darkness. How would that change Western psychology? No ingrained Christian guilt, no obsession with salvation, just perpetual responsibility for every decision. Sounds liberating? Maybe. Or maybe it's an existential burden that no civilization could bear for long. But there's something deeper happening here. The three Abrahamic religions share something absolutely unique. They are religions of the book, sacred text, written and fixed word, revelation encoded on pages that cannot change. This created something revolutionary, mass literacy. Because if salvation depends on reading scriptures, you need to teach people to read. Without Abraham, Moses, and David, perhaps we would never have developed the Western obsession with universal education, with public libraries, with open universities. The very idea that knowledge should be democratized may never have been born. Consider the political implications of this. Without mass literacy motivated by religious texts, the Protestant Reformation would never have happened. Luther preaching his theses fundamentally depended on people being able to read the Bible on their own. Without the Reformation, the political structure of Europe would be completely different. Without religious wars between Catholics and Protestants redrawing borders, perhaps we would never have developed the modern concept of a secular state. Paradoxically, religions based on sacred texts created the conditions for their own political marginalization. And what about Western art? Remove those three figures and you remove entire layers of cultural inspiration. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel doesn't exist. The creation of Adam, that finger of God almost touching the finger of man, disappears completely. Gothic cathedrals, built specifically to tell biblical stories in stone and stained glass for illiterate populations, are never erected. Bach's St. Matthew Passion is never composed. Handel's Messiah never resonates in concert halls. Western culture has holes so deep you could fall into them eternally. But emptiness doesn't just mean loss, it means radical transformation. Perhaps without these specific narratives, Western art would have followed more abstract paths, more focused on raw nature, on the human body without the heavy burden of original sin. Imagine a Renaissance not eternally obsessed with reconciling pagan classicism and Christian doctrine. Imagine art completely free from the theological concept that the body is a corrupted temple, that physical beauty is a dangerous temptation. Perhaps we would have developed a less sexually repressed civilization, or perhaps other neuroses which we cannot even conceive of would have flourished instead. And what about moral philosophy? The Ten Commandments created the Western idea of absolute and universal moral law. Kant built his entire ethics on this invisible foundation. Without Moses, perhaps philosophy would have remained more relativistic, more contextual. Would that be better? Worse? The honest answer is, we don't know. We are imagining a civilization that never existed, using brains shaped by the one that does.
But there's something we haven't yet touched upon, something darker, more disturbing. What if the absence of these figures not only changed civilization, but revealed something terrible about ourselves, something we'd rather not know? Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. These stories didn't just shape how we think, they shaped our ability to justify the unjustifiable. Abraham raising the knife over Isaac created the perfect template. Obey the divine even when it seems monstrous. How many human atrocities have been committed using exactly this logic? God commanded it. It's divine will. Don't question it. The Inquisition, the Crusades, witch hunts, genocides justified because God will recognize his own. Without these narratives, would we have fewer tools to sanctify horror? Or would we simply have found other stories, other gods, other excuses? That's the question that keeps me awake,
Because if removing Abraham, Moses, and David doesn't remove religious violence, only changes its guise, then the problem was never the stories. The problem has always been us. Consider colonialism. European conquerors arriving in the Americas with Bibles in one hand and swords in the other, convert the pagans, save their souls, millions dead, cultures wiped out, continents plundered, all justified because we are bringing the Word of God. These biblical figures provided the narrative, but would humans have been any less cruel without them, or would they have only been cruel in the name of other ideals? Rome conquered half the world without needing Abraham. Genghis Khan massacred entire populations without invoking Moses. Alexander expanded his empire without mentioning David. Violence doesn't need religion, but religion based on these specific figures gave violence something unique: absolute righteousness, the unwavering certainty of being on the right side of history because one is on God's side. And then there's the other side, the side that nobody wants to examine because it's too uncomfortable. These same stories also inspired abolitionists, civil rights movements, people who risked everything for justice because they believed that God saw the oppressed and cared. Harriet Tubman saw herself as Moses freeing slaves. Martin Luther King Jr. preached using language directly from the prophets. How many moral heroes of history were motivated by these narratives? Remove the stories, and you remove both the justification for horrors and the inspiration for heroism. Is the final balance positive or negative? Impossible to calculate. It's like asking whether fire was good or bad for humanity. It warmed homes and burned cities. It cooked food and incinerated people. These biblical figures are our spiritual fire, creation and destruction in the same flame. But here's what truly haunts me. Perhaps it wouldn't matter. Perhaps if those three figures had never existed, we would have invented others exactly like them. Because perhaps the problem isn't Abraham, Moses, and David. Perhaps the problem is that humans desperately need stories that justify their actions, narratives that transform choices into destinies, myths that elevate mundane decisions to cosmic significance. We didn't follow these figures because they existed. We created them because we needed them. And if we had never created these specific ones, we would have created others to fill the same psychological functions: the patriarch, the liberator, the unlikely king. These are universal human archetypes. Abraham, Moses, and David are just the versions that this part of the world chose.
So we've reached the end of this journey through the impossible. And you need to understand something crucial. This video was never really about Abraham, Moses, or David. It was about you, about me, about all of us looking in the mirror and realizing that the person reflected there was shaped by stories that may never have happened. Every time you think about right and wrong, you're thinking with concepts inherited from these narratives. Every time you root for the underdog, you're repeating David. Every time you hope for liberation, you're echoing Moses. Every time you believe in a greater purpose, you're walking with Abraham. You didn't choose this. You were born into it, like a fish that never questioned the water because it never knew anything beyond it. Removing these figures from history isn't just rewriting the past. It's trying to imagine yourself as a fundamentally different person, with different fears, different hopes, different obsessions. And perhaps that's impossible. Perhaps we are so deeply imprinted by these narratives that imagining a world without them is like trying to imagine a new spectrum of colors. Your brain simply doesn't have the tools. But here's what I really want you to take away from this video. It doesn't matter whether these figures existed or not. What matters is that the stories exist. And these stories have power. The power to create civilizations, the power to justify atrocities, the power to inspire heroism, the power to shape every thought you've ever had about what it means to be human. The real question isn't, what if they had never existed? The real question is, now that you see how these stories have shaped you,
What are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to continue living on autopilot, repeating narrative patterns from 3,000 years ago? Or are you going to consciously choose which stories deserve your power, your belief, your life? Because here is the ultimate truth, the only one that truly matters. You are both creature and creator of narratives. Yes, you were shaped by Abraham, Moses, and David, even if you never set foot in a synagogue, church, or mosque. But you also have the power to shape new narratives, to question old ones, to consciously decide which old stories deserve to continue and which ones finally need to die. This alternate world we explore, where these figures never existed, is not merely philosophical speculation. It's an invitation to look at your own life and ask, what stories am I living? Who wrote them? And more importantly, do I agree with them? The deepest absence isn't theirs, it's yours. The absence of you questioning, of you investigating, of you consciously deciding, instead of simply inheriting. So here's my challenge. Live as if these figures never existed, just for one day. Question every moral assumption, every concept of destiny, every belief in cosmic purpose. See what remains. See who you are when you remove the stories. So tell me in the comments, what did you discover? Who are you when you stop repeating narratives from 3,000 years ago? This conversation doesn't end here. It only begins. Subscribe to the channel because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're back to dismantle another certainty you thought was unquestionable. Turn on notifications because the next stories we're going to destroy and rebuild might be even more disturbing than this one. See you at the next demolition every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't miss it.